Ladies, it's selfish for a man to want you to go to work and put in your 40 hours a week, come home and pay 50% of the bills and do 100% of the housework.
If you're in a relationship where you're saying, I'm doing all the domestic labor, and then you have his kids, then you marry him, then you turn around and complain about, I'm doing all this domestic labor. You walked yourself into that. We've got no comment for this. When you look at relationships with a pessimistic lens, is it no surprise that it never works? Describe, let's talk about it.
Ladies, it's selfish for a man to want you to go to work and put in your 40 hours a week, come home and pay 50% of the bills and do 100% of the housework. Yes, a woman would rather pay 100% of her bills than come into a household and split it 50-50 with a man who wants to run the household like a dictatorship. If y'all want to split these bills with these women and ask them to work 40 hours a week and come home and still split the bills 50-50 with you, then you need to come home and do 50% of the housework. Help out with the laundry, help out with the kids, help out with dinner on some nights. Do something other than going to work and coming home and sitting down and waiting until she comes upstairs to take care of you. Don't let them manipulate the situation like that, and don't let him manipulate you, because they will. And for any man who thinks that this is okay because you want to talk about a 2-person household, you're selfish as hell. You're selfish. And you're a manipulator. A mass manipulator at that.
These conversations are so prevalent, but it looks at the worst case scenario, or you create, because essentially this is a creative scenario in your head, that you both are going to work 50-50, but all the housework is on your shoulders. And then in that scenario, of course, you look and say how unfair this is, how terrible this is. We're splitting the bills, but I'm doing the majority of the labor, the unpaid labor, and then you build your entire case on that. Think about this, right? And we always like to look at the nuance of a lot of these situations. Take a step back and say, you've created a scenario in your head, right? You're recording it while you're creating the scenario in your head and then telling you about this fictional man and how awful it is. Real relationships that are quote unquote 50-50, they're never really just about, okay, we're going to split these things down the middle, just the bills. There is an equal level of effort. Some people's effort looks different than others. Some people are better at one thing than the other. Some people wanted things done to a certain standard rather than not. This is not to say that these relationships don't exist, that things that are unfair, but think about it, right? And I know I'm requiring you to think about this a little bit much. When you're creating this scenario, why would a woman seeing this unequal division of labor, the minute you guys move in together, the minute you guys are together and continue to stay in that relationship to the point where you have children, you have one kid, you have 2 kids, and you're still complaining about the unequal division of labor? It's been like that since forever, right? If we're just thinking about the scenario, he wants you to pay 50% of the bills and you're already doing all the cooking, all the cleaning. And then you choose to stay in that relationship. You choose to further the relationship. You choose to now have kids. You choose now to double down in that. When we create these scenarios in which it's very pessimistic, when it's very awful, it never really looks at the reality of it. You don't have to be in that relationship. You don't have to stay there. This is for the women. If you decided this is who you want to be with, yet you're doing all the unpaid labor that you like to lament about, why do you now double down in a relationship? At some point, we have to let people do what they're doing and say, you chose these things. Same thing with the men, same thing with the women. If the men, you choose an unruly woman and that becomes your baby dad, baby mama, and now your life is hell, well, you chose to do that. You ran so quickly into the bed and now you're paying the price for that for the rest of your life. This is a fault of your own. Women, if you're in a relationship where you're saying, I'm doing all the domestic labor, and then you have his kids, then you marry him, then you turn around and complain about, I'm doing all this domestic labor. You walked yourself into that. We've got no comment for that. That's terrible. We got no comment for that. So when you see women, and she's very, like, right now you see a lot of her content is focused on that. An imaginary scenario where all the things are wrong, and then look, this is men are wrong for doing this. You create a scenario rather than looking, saying, okay, how does this actually end up happening? Do people decide what the relationship dynamic is going to be, or they simply have a framework adopted upon them and they just say, well, this is unfair. I've been with this for the last 3 years. It's unfair. You don't have to stay with a person if you're looking and saying, this is what my life is going to look like, that's why you date. That's why you date. You get an idea of what life would be like if we continue this ad nauseum. If we continue being together, this is what it's going to look like. If it looks like he goes to work and he comes back home and he waits for you to take care of him, and you don't enjoy that part of the relationship, why stay? Instead of using these scenarios and now using it to dogpile men and say how terrible they are, look at it for reality. I'm not saying that, oh, women, no, look at it for reality. You have autonomy. You have an ability to say, this is not what I want. This is what I want. Then you go after that. Then you stay in relationships that actually promote that. Instead, you want to create the scenario where the guy just works, comes home, puts his feet up, scratches at his chin, at his balls on the couch, and waits for you to finish your 8, 9, 10, 12-hour shift, and then come home and say, babe, where's dinner? Upset with you. You create these scenarios. You heard it somewhere else, who heard it from somewhere else, who heard it from someone else in this process. How many of your friends, how many of your elders are actually in those real-time scenarios and not what you just hear, what you've actually observed yourself? I work, he works. He takes care of this, I take care of this. That's the dynamic that works. People get to come in and identify what areas they are better at, what they don't mind. You may not want to do the laundry. He may have no problem doing the laundry. It takes you more energy to do the laundry because you don't want to do it. It takes him less because he does not mind doing it. Same thing with cleaning. Women tend to clean more than men because you have a higher standard of cleanliness. It's not that men aren't clean. It's not you just want to follow behind when he says he's done cleaning. So it might make sense that you clean. Okay, what can he now take over while you do that? Maybe in some areas you refuse to clean. You don't want to clean the bathroom. Okay, he knows he has to clean the bathroom. You divide these things in relationships to where it makes sense for both parties involved. Instead of creating scenarios with this generalized rubric of what it's supposed to be, and then getting mad at men for imaginary scenarios. Imaginary scenarios which imaginary women decided they're going to stay in this. So now women take this. They take this idea, this concept, this problematic scenario, and they say, that could never be me. An imaginary scenario you're upset about. Now you're upset about men who in this imaginary scenario don't really exist. If you find men that believe in this in your day-to-day, in your dating experience, you don't have to build a life with them. Instead of complaining that this is how men that believe in 50-50, listen to the conversation that they're saying, yes, we have to have a division of labor, of finances, because this way we can actually grow together. If you want me to do all of these things, if you want me to pay all the bills and also take on equal partnership and division of labor at home, understand I'm going to keep going so I can find someone that I want to do this with, or someone that agrees that this is not the scenario you want. Are there men out there that expect you to do absolutely all the labor? Yes, absolutely. For in exchange for that, yeah, is he paying everything? That would make sense, depending on what dynamic you want. Whatever you have agreed to in your life, whatever scenario you've created and sat there, maybe tacit agreement, maybe an actual verbal agreement, it is now your responsibility. That's on you. That's not for the rest of us to look and say, that doesn't make sense. Are there people with that scenario where a man pays all the bills and he doesn't do anything at home? Yes, that's what their dynamic calls for. For us to look unmarried, not in relationships, to say, hey, how problematic that is. We sound stupid. We sound foolish. We're hating from outside the club. Find someone that agrees to a dynamic that makes sense for you and go about your business. That's all we can do about it. Rather than, because we can do the same, we can create scenarios in which we say, this is crazy for a woman to expect this. I go to work, I come back, I clean, I cook, I do all this. She just stays on the couch. You would see, okay, do you see people with that dynamic? No, not really. No, not really. But if it's a way for me to try to disparage women, you would look and say, that sounds kind of stupid. Why would you agree to be in that relationship? What happens in these scenarios? We take away women's autonomy. We take a woman's ability to choose. We take away the responsibility that says you decided to be in this relationship. And even this is imaginary scenario you created, you decided to be here. And then you want to get mad at men in real life or imaginary scenarios you created. Doesn't make any sense to us. Listen, if you disagree, let me know down in the comments below. If you see other videos on your screen, check those out. Let me know your thoughts about those in those videos. And of course, if you listen to my voice now, you have not subscribed, I think you should. I'm just trying to build something dope. I'll see you in the next one.